now we have seen that we get network interfaces by default when you launch EC2 instances. So let me show you when you launch an EC2 instance and select everything, and in the configure instance details page, you can make some modifications for network interfaces also. So I'm launching this EC2 instance. The VPC is AWS Foundation VPC, and this is the subnet which I have chosen to launch this VPC in. Now, if you go at the bottom, you have this network interfaces here. Now, if you see, by default, you get the primary network interface, which is ETH0. Now, this network interface is created by default when you launch an EC2 instance. You can add additional network interfaces also by clicking this Add Device button. So if I add one more network interface, this EC2 instance will have two network interfaces attached to it. Now if it is asking the primary IP address, if you see here ETH0, till now you have not touched or you have not done any tweaking as far as IP address is concerned, but you can do that. You can assign primary IP of your choice, but yes, the IP address should be from the CIDR range of your subnet. You can assign additional IP address also. So this additional IP address or the secondary IP address would also be attached to the same network interface. For example, I have chosen this subnet public 1A. The CIDR of that subnet is 10.20.10.0, and I can choose IP address of my own. So I can say that okay, I want 10.20.10.10 and 10.20.10.11 IP addresses attached to this network interface. Similarly, you can add additional device from other subnets also. Now if you see here, it is showing us three subnets, public 1A, private 1A and private 1A2. So you can select another subnet, and similarly you can add or you can choose your IP addresses. So till now EC2 was assigning IP address on its own, but yes, you can do it yourself also. Let me go ahead and launch this EC2 instance. After the status changes to running, we'll go ahead and log into this EC2 instance and see some Elastic Network Interface stuff. But one more thing, you can create network interface from the console also. In this EC2 console, if you scroll down, you have network and security. In the same place, you have something called network interfaces. And then, as of now, we have only one network interface which is attached to the EC2 instance which you have just launched. And the security group associated with that network interface is WebSG. We can create one more network interface in any of the subnets of your choice. It can be AWS Foundation VPC or any other VPC, any subnet from any of the VPCs. Say I choose public 1A, and private IP address, I can choose private IP address on my own also. And I can select a security group. So the network interface has been created in the same AZ, in the same VPC, in the same subnet. If you want, you can create this network interface in a different subnet also. Once the network interface has been created, you can go ahead and attach this network interface to any of the instances. So this is the instance which you have just launched. I'm attaching this network interface to the same EC2 instance. As I said, this network interface could have been from a different subnet also, and it could have a different security group attached to it as well. As of now, this EC2 instance has two network interfaces. If you go in the description tab, you have network interfaces. So it shows you that this EC2 instance has two network interfaces. One is ETH0 and the other one is ETH1. By default, if you launch an EC2 instance, that will contain only one network interface. But in this case, we created an additional network interface from the same page, from the EC2 console, and attached that network interface or ENI to this EC2 instance. When we launched the EC2 instance, we had only one network interface, but we assigned two IP addresses to that network interface. So during launch, we had only one network interface, which is ETH0. We had chosen two IP addresses. So this is what it is showing. Primary IP address 10.20.10.10 from ETH0, and 10.20.10.11 is also from ETH0. From ETH1, we have 10.20.10.20. So we have three private IP addresses associated with this EC2 instance. Two IP addresses belong to ETH0 ENI, and the third IP address belongs to ETH1 ENI. If you want, you can have one more IP address also for ETH1 network interface or ENI. What I'll do now is, as this EC2 instance does not have any public IP, I'll go ahead and create an elastic IP and associate that elastic IP to this EC2 instance. I have already allocated this elastic IP. Now I'll go ahead and associate this address to my EC2 instance. Now if you see here, there are two options. I have not selected the other option ever. So we have instance and network interface. I cannot select instance because this instance has multiple network interfaces. If I select the instance and click any of the IP address, try to associate this, it is giving me error saying that this instance has multiple interfaces attached to it. So I'll have to select a network interface for that. Go ahead and select network interface. Now I can choose any one of the network interface. This is the primary and this is the secondary. I'll select the primary as of now. There's reason for this, I'll tell you later on. And then the private IP address. This network interface has two private IP address. I'll select the primary private IP and then click on associate. Now it has been associated. Let me go ahead and log into this EC2 instance now. I have logged into this EC2 instance. If you type ifconfig command, it will show you the information about network interfaces. Press enter. Now if you see, I have ETH0 and ETH1. Till now I had only ETH0 network interface. Now I have ETH1 also. There's one more interesting thing. If you see here, ETH0 is associated with only the primary IP address which we attached during launch, 10.20.10.10. It is not associated with 10.20.10.11. This is not your job. The Unix administrator or the network administrator will associate that additional IP address to this ETH0 network interface also. That's why I associated the elastic IP with this private IP 10.20.10.10 because 10.20.10.11 has not been configured yet. So the configuration has to be done by either Unix admins or network admins. ETH1 is pretty simple. We have only one IP address for ETH1 and that has been associated with ETH1 also 10.20.10.20. I could have chosen the elastic IP to be associated with ETH1 also. So when you do your assignment or exercise, go ahead and do that. Allocate one more elastic IP address and associate that elastic IP address with this network interface or this private IP address and try to log in using the second elastic IP address. So this is multiple IP addresses and this is how elastic network interface works. And this is very important stuff if you want to host multiple applications with different IP addresses on the same server. Suppose you want to have your web application and your application tier on the same server, but you want to have different IP addresses for them. Then what you do is you create multiple elastic network interfaces, attach all the ENIs to the EC2 instance and associate different IP addresses with different ENIs and run your applications on those IP addresses only.